Still working on figuring out the timing between these buttons too. Last week was all about trying to guess when it was going to trigger live, and I was almost early on all of them. And now this week we're here. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
LinkedIn. How you doing today, Danielle?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing? Oh, you just disappeared.
I shouldn't mess with my mic too much. Anyways, it's been a fun week, to say the least. Lots more content, lots more HubSpot updates, including an exciting kind of drip feed from our LinkedIn compatriots about a sales workspace. But I don't even know if I was, familiar enough with the prospecting workspace yet. I don't know if we should be excited that was not able to last a year, but this team, they're going to keep iterating. They're listening. There's been a lot of feedback loops created around this workspace. We do need it to work very badly. It solves a lot of issues as far as people having to work all throughout the system. So we thought we'd dive in today and, share some of our experiences, some refreshing takes if we haven't been in here in a while. So you say we dig in, Danielle?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot that I could complain about. And I was just digging up my notes from when I evaluated this for a client. I think it was last or this year, January timeframe. Um, and I scoped out, I was like, I heard about this thing at Inbound. Let's go do it. It's going to be great for your business because they had leads coming in who would not yet be ready to buy and then come back later. And so I was like, this is perfect for you guys. Let's figure out what this looks like. They had a pretty good sized sales team. I think they had like 4 SDRs. They had 2 or 3 AEs. They had a CRO. And I was like, this will be great. It's a new workspace for all of us to play with together. As I started looking into it and planning their shift over to prospect and leads in HubSpot, I was like, just kidding, we're not there yet. And for this particular client, I've actually had several conversations with the HubSpot product research teams. They love to use the index views for contacts and companies. And one of the limitations was that leads just weren't visible in that view. You couldn't see how many leads were associated to a contact. And so for them, I was like, well, that alone is a non-starter for you guys. But I dug through it pretty deeply before I came to that conclusion, because there was such a huge benefit. And I still love it. And I still want to roll this out to a couple clients. And I hopefully the new sales workspace is going to make up for a lot of the complaints I have. I've already seen some of my complaints get solved in the later releases. So let's take a look at it. You want to share your screen? You want me to share mine?
I'll go ahead and let you share your screen.
And let me share my screen? Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Let me find the right window.
No, this was an interesting launch. And, I often say that I appreciate the way they can take baby steps sometimes when introducing new things. But there was a ton of hype for this one. They launched it at Inbound, also introducing like a new object that any HubSpotter had previously spent their entire lives telling you did not need because it's such a mess when it usually is used in Salesforce.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of like, oh, okay, I think like we know HubSpot usually does this stuff better, so let's like, oh, it looks like a journey, so it's not exactly like, Salesforce, but now we immediately understand we have to change some of like the themes that we talk about in terms of the differences and how workflows happen throughout the system. And now we have to like unlearn and re-educate the whole market about, yes, leads are a thing. No, it's not like Salesforce. So it was good to start the conversation. There was all these sessions at Inbound related to this specific workspace. It was definitely a centerpiece. But then in HubSpot fashion, unfortunately, and they make it very easy to do things. This was not, it's like the baby steps to get into it were easy, but then you just had like Bigfoot coming in like trying to use it, and you click that button, and all of a sudden you have like 1,000 leads, and there's no customizability. You can't change properties. You can't even bulk delete. There's no way to. It was like, okay, glad we got it out the door.
Right.
But then it was like this huge learning curve throughout the past year, which I guarantee has helped them get to the sales
Yeah,
workspace. But that's kind of my, you know, remembrance of how this went.
definitely. Oh, look, I'm actually not in the right account. Let's get in that account. There we are. Good news, it looks pretty similar across accounts. Because good news, bad news, you can't do a whole lot of customization on these record views yet. Maybe, hopefully, that will change with the new sales workspace. We'll see. But one of my complaints in the lead view, especially for this client, was that you couldn't customize the properties. So in one of the first live streams that we did together, it was really building out who should see what properties and at what point. So when you've got a salesperson who's taking over this new lead that just came in, we want to know what their last conversion was. We want to know how they got in here. And the only way to make that visible in the way that you really want it to on a lead record was I think still is, to edit the global about section on a contact. And then that was mirrored into the lead workspace view. Not great, in my opinion. Not great.
Yes, it's kind of like, let's bring everything together and then not be able to manage any of it. Like, okay, I'm turning right around, going back to my
Yeah.
records, like my records views, my records index screen, and you
Yeah.
just you just let me know, when it's safe to come back in.
Right. I've just been kind of sitting on my hands and watching the updates roll in to see when some of my wish list items would get checked off. Because for this client that I scoped it out with, I had a list of limitations and unanswered questions. And I've just been kind of watching to see what of that changes. So I've got my like when you can check off everything on this list, then I'm like 100% on board. So I am very excited to get access to the private beta, which I definitely did not remember was private beta and haven't got access to it yet, but hopefully soon. I've got like 3 different portal requests in for that private beta. Somebody please give it to me. Um,
Yep, something to look forward to next week.
yeah,
Uh,
that maybe that'll be our episode next week.
yeah.
Um,
So as we're looking at this kind of blank slate here, take us through like what you would expect to see if somebody was using this, or the kind of, like, in your words, the goals of this workspace.
well, my first step is don't click this button. This is what kind of floods everything in. It does give you this where I don't think this even existed before. It was just like turn it on and everything comes in as a lead, or you get to choose which life cycle stages. But I have most of my clients who are managing some kind of lead funnel are not always using life cycle stages. Life cycle stages are a little more precious. We try to keep everybody playing in lead status. And lead status isn't here. So I can't define that. Um,
Yeah, and
and
just the way that's worded, I think it said like, "Help me find more leads." Like,
right.
I think 99 out of 100 salespeople are going to click that button.
Yeah, they're going to hit yes. And I'll be like, wait a minute, what is all of this? Um, these settings are all great. I think generally when I want to go in and set up these leads, I know for a fact that I want to set up the processes and workflows. I don't necessarily want to rely on the automations from an admin perspective that HubSpot has in their settings. Again, because a lot of it's based on lifecycle stages, and I want it to be based on lead status. And also, I just want to make sure that if somebody's doing like an import and they decide to import them all as like MQLs, that those don't all come in as leads. As an admin who is very anal about how this gets done, wants to make sure that we don't just flood things in with no context. What's
Yeah,
funny
and I
though
think
is I thought I
that's.
hit cancel here, and apparently I can't get out of this flow.
Uh-oh.
So we're about to flood our demo prospecting workspace here.
Well, it's funny, there's a bunch in there. You just can't see them because uh, either we probably haven't assigned a sales seat, or you don't own these leads. So I'm gonna check on my side.
There's view
Um,
all leads.
there we
Yeah.
go. Yeah. But to your point, like um, this stuff that like these buttons, these on buttons that we can't like if you want to manage this effectively and also try to fit it into a portal that's been doing stuff already, especially related to life cycle stages, like one of the centerpieces of how reporting like activates so many other things. It syncs between, it can sync between contacts and companies. It can be automated based on deals. And now we throw this in, there is a significant amount of change management required to bring this workspace into play. And you kind of miss all that when you're just clicking these, get started buttons, right?
Yeah, for sure. And this is what I was talking about with the record customization, where once you do get these leads in, and we saw those clicks I just did where I was like, wait, there's nothing here. It's because it defaults to a, I'm going to call it a filter, but it's really not a filter because it doesn't behave like the other filters, where in order to see all leads, you have to click up here in this actions piece. Like I consider these filters, but to see all leads, which from an admin or a CRO or a sales manager perspective, that's what you want to keep track of. You have to go into this actions view all leads button, and then you can see it all. And then if I click into one of these, this about section is what I was talking about that just syncs it from the global about section, and you can't customize it unless you change the global about section. So if you really want to see what happened with this person, sure, recent communications are helpful if you're already in conversation with them. If it's, a marketing lead that came in because they miraculously filled out your requested demo form on your website, which is like, a SaaS dream is when those leads come in, then we definitely want that created as a lead. We want it created as a hot lead. And we want someone to know, the first salesperson to touch this, we want them to know that that is how they got here. And that's not obvious anywhere. Like that just doesn't really exist. Not even in associations. So the associations are helpful, but there just isn't enough customization on this view. And there aren't the things that I would expect to be in this view. Um, so hopefully where the screenshots that I've seen so far of the new sales management workspace, or sales workspace, I don't know if it's manager ready yet, but the sales workspace, it's got a lot of different tiles and different things that it's pulling together. So I would hope that either we can customize those records so that we can see the thing we would expect to see, or it's already there because HubSpot has listened to all of our complaints and wish lists over the last year to get this built out.
Yeah, and that's the thing we can take solace in usually. Usually they're listening. I mean, people have been very vocal about this
I being
piece
one of them.
because it's exciting to think about. Like, I love the move to workspaces in general.
Yes.
And this was the first one that was going to get the maximum feedback for sure. Um, and it's just, so they're listening, and I'm sure they took a bunch of it into account. But this is where, for me, personally, they have a tendency to develop a lot of these things for a specific set of customers. And I was, telling you earlier, like the sentence in the update talks about how all salespeople in this modern environment are responsible for pipeline generation. And that is not true in some industries. So, like, and that's where it all comes to us, where we're trying to like translate what HubSpot is trying to say. We're trying to protect people from and help them view it how they're gonna like use it for their business.
Right.
Ultimately, this is the future. I think there's lots of opportunity to use leads effectively, but you have to understand, like, if you're going to use this space, um, you're probably going to be using leads as well. And that's where if you set up a bunch of stuff based on lifecycle stage and lead status and these other things that were supposed to fill the gap of not having a leads object, there's change there. Like, and you have to understand what that is. And, you know, I'll share some links in the comments where we did a 2-part episode. You know, me and Emerson McCuhan, um, about leads and lifecycle stages. There's lots to be understood, and you can see HubSpot moving in the direction of updating, you know, how they view lifecycle stages, and it's just a very interesting evolution at the moment because there's so much built out in support of that lifecycle stage property. But at the same time, you know, without this, people have had a hard time like separating out and getting visibility on resell, upsell, and cross sell, you know, revenue management specifically, right? And this should solve for that if you implement it properly.
Right. Well, and you and I were talking about this earlier this week, where I don't think that there should be a company lifecycle stage basically until opportunity. Like, to try and figure out the relationship between contact and lead and company, to really connect the dots on like where a company is in life cycle stages. Like, is it the furthest contact in life cycle stages that should roll up to the company? Is it that you should only look at companies, but yet somehow you're talking to people and it's people taking the action? Like, it's really confusing to tie all those pieces together. So I kind of like taking the step away from that and sticking it in leads, but I still think there's some sort of like process and change management internally that either HubSpot needs to help facilitate, or you just sort of need to set those standards for your business, where like company lifecycle stages are meaningless until opportunity, or like contact lifecycle stages are really only going to mean this in this context. Like, contact lifecycle stages are what we base you know, some processes on, but it's really leads that get all of the activity. Like, sort of setting those standards and those definitions. There's going to be commonalities, of course, in industries. Like, I primarily work with SaaS companies, but you still need to carve out time to define that standard for your business.
Yes, for sure. So, what are some of the other checklist items?
Well, one of the big things, like I said, for my client that I was looking at this for, was going into the contact index view, which I've also called the matrix view in the past. And I want to see leads here. I think you can see it now because we've got all of these associated things that can display. So we've got contact leads. Let's move those up to the top so we can find them. And we do have it here now. So that's a big check mark for me. And I did have a conversation with the HubSpot product research team, shout out to Alexa, on all of the things that I would like to see for associated records in this view. So I don't know where it is on the roadmap. I don't know what they're working on, but know that there is definitely some thought and attention coming to how this gets presented. This little pop-out box is really helpful as it is. Like, what are the leads that are associated to this person? That's great.
It's helpful if you have decent naming conventions.
Yeah.
Right now, it's like, for me, it's been just a high level understanding. Is the number, is this information like from a high level summarizing the way that I think it should? If yes, now I know there's a bunch of stuff that I can go look at to confirm the information
Right.
in that stuff if I need. But if not, like if I'm, especially when these like columns, depending on like, especially when you're doing multiple associations and everything's supposed to be associated together,
Mm-hmm.
like, and one says 3 records and one says 4 records, you know, there is a problem to go find and fix somewhere.
Right. And you can't sort by these. So if I want to see all of my contacts pulled to the top that have leads associated, I don't know if I can do that. Let's see if we can do. I don't think we can add the filter for associated leads. There's associated records, but there's no roll up property for number of leads associated. Not out of the box.
What is associated records? Is that just like literally a total of all records?
I don't see
You
leads.
can't do leads there.
So we're
Associated
definitely
records
limited there.
contained.
If you want to see all your contacts who have leads associated to them, I don't know how you would do that.
Right.
Other than going to leads and seeing the leads.
Right. Do we
The,
have that view here? Like, can we pick leads from the drop down in the upper left?
can we put,
Oh,
sorry, say that again?
in the upper left, where we have contacts.
Can we choose leads
Leads
there?
in there? I don't think so. Yeah.
No, so
So
you don't
they,
get the index view.
yeah. So this is where it's like, there's a transition period, okay?
Yeah.
When you got all these objects, this is where like orders is one for me, obviously. And that's a place where there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of functionality in the system that supports leads and doesn't support orders. But then you have half objects, which feels like the way leads is right now, that I can get in that drop down and I can just see a nice list, right?
Yeah.
Like, why isn't other objects there? Why aren't other objects there? There's lots of stuff like that. I still appreciate what the team is doing and the direction they're going. They are trying to standardize that across the CRM objects.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to see where they're going, and they're making improvements literally every day. So try not to complain too much.
Yeah. I think I love the concept of leads. Like I said when we first started, like I think it's going very much in the right direction and very quickly, especially given how much change we've seen in this just over the last year. I can't wait to get into the sales workspace. Um, but it definitely has a long way to go. And bringing it up to a true object is a great step that I have on my checklist. Like, I need to be able to use this in all the ways I would expect to use contacts, like a true associated object. One of my other complaints and items on my checklist was that you can't really use it in reports. They had these canned reports that are definitely helpful. Like, these are a lot of the things that I want to see in this lead funnel. You've got a lead journey. This is all dummy data, so of course it's going to look a little funny, but um, these are things I want to see for sure. But if I want to analyze it on my own terms and look at like, where did these leads come from? Attribution's always a big piece of it. Like, what is the form that they came from most often, most commonly, or what is the channel that they came from? I'm not seeing that really in here. I can see their progress through the stages, which is helpful. I can see how long it took for the sales team to respond to them. Great. But if I actually want to create a report that is, all of the different attributes that should be associated with a lead, I don't think leads are in here. Oh, maybe they
Beta.
are.
Beta.
Hey, I'll take a beta.
Yeah.
Well, all right, this is a big check then.
Yeah.
And then if we were to add the contacts as a secondary, then we could start to get into some of that attribution. So if we've got count of leads and then original source. Oh, it didn't pull over.
And this is like, now we're back to like the data model conversation.
Yeah.
And sourcing and attribution. Like, so this is mainly from a pretend like in-person event,
Yeah.
right? Which is novel in the way that we're doing that because we're using custom objects and we're not using all the usual automated forms of sourcing. But that's where understand that you know uh, original source and the way that people like import sheets from shows and which fields you're actually using to support knowing that it's from that show, right? Having that all set up, you know, usually needs a little more thought than people
Right.
give to it. We don't want to end up with like 150 drop down choices that reach back because we put the same show title in every single year. But things like that to consider why you want to map. It's, when I say change management, I'm talking about process mapping, property, like understanding properties, Don't just going hog wild, creating new properties left and right, because that's where, again, we come back to associations.
Yeah.
How are these things associated? Can I use information from the contact, from the company, from these other places to support what I need to see in my leads?
Right. I just came off of a call with a client where we were talking about how to consolidate some properties, and we landed on we should have two properties instead of one. But as we were going through the conversation to come to that conclusion, my client was like, I thought you were going to get mad at me if I said two properties instead of one, because they know that I'm so anti property and creating new properties. But I will say the new sync properties can be so helpful, especially if you've got outside platforms, which they do in their case, that only read the contact record, which is bizarre and should not exist, but still it does. And so having the sync properties so that no one's creating crazy workflows and copying things over and, creating contact properties to show company details. So those sync properties are amazing. But this reporting is fantastic. I love this.
Yeah. And
So
it's
if
even
we
like
wanted to get
six.
to how many contacts have a lead, let's see if we can build that. No, it would be like email. I don't know if I like building under pressure like this.
Like, would we need like contact to be the primary?
Probably. This is where I always warn people, and I have to check myself on it too, that your joins can get really complicated and just throw things off completely.
Yeah, and a lot of people want to jump into like, yeah, you start going like calculated properties route, and like you want, you get it, you want this stuff to be automated, maintenance free, but going through this process first is so helpful. So that, because if you can't understand the manual connections that you need to make, do not try to automate it. Do not try to build other properties and records and all these things that are based on that thing that you don't understand, like how it's connected.
Yeah.
Point one. And then point two, like when you do this work, now it's much easier to give somebody else instructions to support. This is the exact field. I need to do this. I need it connected over here, and I need to report on this thing that's happening with those fields. Right?
Right.
We're not trying to figure everything out in that moment, right? Because that's what's the worst for us. We talked last week about not being able to audit portals,
Right.
right? Like we, as much as we'd love to get those tasks done for you, as soon as we realize there's a glitch in the matrix, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, how does the data model set up? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I see this associations. I can't choose leads. So like,
Right.
where are we? Right? And
Right.
that's like, that's the stuff that turns a 10-minute task into hours, right?
Weeks,
Yes,
depending on how messy
exactly.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting because I got to my list of emails with leads, but I still don't know how I could filter it to contacts that have an associated lead
Okay.
because there's a bunch of zeros here.
Right. So
In
if
this,
we
I mean, this is a pivot table. Maybe in a table I could do it differently.
click on filters, does it give us an option up there?
Can you filter on like has an association if it's not a roll up property?
Right. No.
Because for companies and contacts, it's pretty straightforward. There's an associated number of associated contacts field for a property or for a company, and then there's the like number of associated companies for a contact.
Right.
But we don't
Yeah,
have the
and it
same
would
thing
be
here.
here. Like it would be here as an option if we already had it involved. So yeah, that's seemingly something that I would want to understand very quickly if I'm a
Right.
sales guy trying to understand which contacts to start with.
Let's try one more thing and see if you can do it in lists. Lists are always the workaround because you can reach across objects while building a list. So let's see if we can build a list of contacts who don't have a lead. Contact
By the way,
base.
like when you ask us to do stuff without understanding your portal, this is exactly what it looks like. This is Danielle's first time in this portal.
Yeah.
She has no idea which properties exist, what the data looks like at all. Thankfully, we're in HubSpot, so we can figure some stuff out still.
Yeah, and I at least like the HubSpot standard properties, I'm pretty familiar with. There are always some things that surprise me, but I at least know what I can pull on that's like HubSpot standard and will look very similar, if not the same, in every portal that I go into. So that's why I chose original source when I was starting to talk about attribution. You could have an elaborate attribution model that I know nothing about, but I know for a fact it can always come back to original source, latest source, and record source to give me like some baseline indication of what's going on. But in this case, I think we can build this list by just saying like associated lead object name is known, right? Lead name is, well, so this would be contacts with leads. Contact is associated to any leads. Yeah. So then if I
There we
wanted
go.
to do a list of contacts without leads, I would probably do another list that says any contact that is not part of this list. But I think you would need both.
Yeah, for sure.
The is not logic is always kind of tricky.
Yeah, that's where it's like as good as they are at standardizing how things work in some places, in other places not so much. Um, but that's why you call on people like Danielle who have done it 20 times the wrong way before.
It's true. So to take this one step further to operationalize this for like a sales manager, if you want to see all these contacts who have leads, you can't add a column in this view for associated leads. You would have to go into this contact matrix view and add a list filter here to be able to see the leads in this view that have leads and see what they are. So you can get there, which is, I mean, that's a huge improvement over where this was 8 months ago. Like to be able to get to this point where I can see the leads in the matrix view and the index view, that I can make a list based off of having leads, that I can play with that in the custom report, like that's huge. That's like that just shows how far we've come in less than a year. So I can't wait to see what is tucked away in the new sales prospecting or the sales workspace.
Yeah, me too. And they have come a long way. This is one of those things where it's like they moved unbelievably quick. Weren't super communicative about a lot of stuff. So like all of a sudden we had customizable properties when we didn't the day before, and it's like all tucked into this like overall beta. So sometimes it's a new beta, sometimes it's just updated like way to use it, and
Right.
like wait for somebody in the community to just mention it. Um, Before we wrap, like if we could come back to the prospecting tab,
Yeah.
the second tab that you have open, like, because I think if we go back to summary, even though we're not going to see a lot of data, like, what is your stance? Like, because we just showed a bunch of stuff that
Under the hood.
should help you, uh, one, visualize and understand the data, but also troubleshoot, in my opinion. Like if you see something weird here, like which lists, which areas are you going to go to double check first, but also
Mm-hmm.
maybe fix data, second. How much of that should be here and accessible to the sales team that's expected to use this? Like how deep do we go as far as what they can see?
It's hard to say. I think some of it depends on how much you can trust your sales team or how much they're using HubSpot and like what they know about HubSpot. Because we just went through so many different screens and tools to get to the answer of which contacts don't have leads. Um, I would not expect a salesperson to do that, especially if we're teaching everyone like this is your home base. You should come in and check out leads. And this is sort of their like spoon fed workspace. So then there needs to be an admin who is managing how leads get into that workspace. So if they're like, I have no leads, there are the type who are going to be like, well, I have no leads, better go golfing. And then there are the type that are going to be like, I have no leads, that's a huge problem. Let's go just bang things around and see what I can find. And then there's no guarantee that they're going to get created as leads. They might just start calling contacts because they found somebody's phone number. Like it's tough to say how well your salespeople know what they're doing in Salesforce and God, not Salesforce, in HubSpot. And maybe they use Salesforce in the past and they're going to take a Salesforce approach and just start doing their own thing in a Salesforce way. But it just depends on what they're comfortable doing. And I think I like this view as like, this is where you log in and start your day. These are the tasks you need to get done. Ideally, again, there's an admin on the other side of those tasks that is deciding how those get created. Like if a lead comes in from a created or book a demo form, then the task gets created to call them and there's a new lead for it. And maybe they're getting dropped into a sequence because it's an automated follow-up and you have Sales Enterprise that can do that for you. Then it becomes very straightforward what's happening and what your role in that machine is. But that machine has to be extremely well built for this to be the primary workspace for them. So then once you get through like the 5 to 10 minutes that you're spending, maybe you make a few phone calls and it takes you an hour and a half. Then what happens next in your day? Then you're going to start digging into contact records and to make sure that we maintain that association with leads and that all of that activity is getting tracked in a way that rolls up into the reporting and goes to the execs and the board. There needs to be some really strict training and process documentation to make sure that everyone's on the same page there.
Yeah, and that's huge. And that's another aspect of the change management because like a lot of these tools get developed and especially admins get excited. Like, oh, sales guy, I just made your job so easy. All you had to do is just go over here. And like
Yeah.
the first thing they see that I don't understand, or I don't know what's going to happen, or I don't know why it looks like that. If you don't give them the opportunity and train them how to do that, to go check very easily,
Yeah.
like especially like it'd be so easy to come in, especially sequences, like everything that goes into sequences, including like lists and the things that you were just showing, is why that came to mind. It's like very rarely is it like we present these tools like, okay, salesperson, you can come in and just bang it out, right?
Yeah.
But I get to like the third call I'm supposed to make, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't look right. Like
Right.
I'm not going to make this call, so I either have to skip it, or I want to understand why it doesn't look right. And if I can't, if I don't know how, that's when I start to export data
Yeah.
because I know it's in the system. I
Yeah.
don't know how you're presenting it to me, so let me just get it in a spreadsheet. Then I can understand it. Now I'm calling from the spreadsheet. That's how you lose adoption. And it is a fine line to walk because we want to make progress, but you just have to understand kind of that user perspective of like understand what goes wrong in these cases. Like, yes, we could get to the point where they just have 10 lined up, they knock them out really easily, all the tasks fall off, all the sequences fire. It's rarely how the day goes.
Yeah. It's
And
never
if
going to
they're
work
not
out as cleanly as you hope it
empowered,
does.
right? And if they're not empowered to solve for that in the system, they are required to solve for it outside of the system because they
Right.
still got a job to do, right?
Right.
So we'll look ahead to next week to see how much of that's been solved, assuming we've gotten into the sales workspace, which I
Yes.
think
Please,
we
someone give
have.
it to us. We will
It
get
was
excited.
fun. Thanks so much this
Yeah.
week.
Same.